Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, and it's time for this week's One Last Thing with co-host Slava Cooperstein. Slava, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. After that performance, fantastic.
How could we not? How could we not? One of the things that it's been present since the beginning of Lamar's career, really, is how he has a concentration of targets to certain receivers. Andrews has been his go-to guy for many years, largely because they have kind of a mind meld going on in terms of what Andrews does to create space on an extended play, and also how much he just trusts him to go up and either play offense or defense as necessary on a contested ball. So we thought we'd do a little episode today to talk through some of the Ravens receivers now and kind of where they are in terms of their Lamar Jackson trust bank account.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things that you kind of always wonder whether we make too much or too little of it. But, it's definitely a thing, and we've seen it pop up numerous times. Just like Harbaugh has his doghouse, Lamar has his a little bit. But I'll go ahead and start with a pretty easy one, and that would be Zay Flowers.
I do want to drop in this, but before we jump into the individual players, which I think is the meat and potatoes of this, and it's going to be the fun part to talk through. I asked a question of Monken way back in camp, and I said, how are you going to scheme distribution of the football? Or does it require, and I forget the exact way I worded the question, you to distribute the football more by scheme in order to have every blade of grass defended, the way he talked about being a balanced offense defends everything. And his response to it was, first is, yeah, there's some scheme involved, but also, it's due to the players there have to make plays. And that's true in any team sport that, if you're the hot shooter, you get the ball more from the point guard because he trusts you to make shots. And, if whatever the case, you get more at bats if you're hitting 300. Kind of thing. That was he gave a couple of different analogies that were in that vein, and he's right about that, and that's why we're coming back to this trust thing because Lamar certainly has to. A lot of it can be schemed in terms of your first read is here, your second read is here, but Lamar has to actually trust what's going on. He has to what he sees. He has to like in order to deliver that football, and in particular, Lamar has so many off schedule throws that really trust comes into play more for a quarterback like him.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely want your quarterback to be confident in who he's throwing to and all of that. But it's important to build that confidence as well and make a concerted effort to do so. In particular, because the later on in the season when you have if you have Flowers and Andrews lined up, and then the other receiver of the defense is going to treat as a non-factor. You don't want to be taking your own players out of consideration for the defense to have to account for. So it's very important to get as many people involved and build up that trust as possible. So with that, we'll start with somebody who has built up trust very quickly with Lamar, and that's Zay Flowers. He's done a really excellent job coming in as a first-round rookie. I think the offseason work that he and Lamar put in together has really paid off because he has shown an ability to not just get open, not just make plays, not just have sure hands for the most part, but also on some of those unscheduled plays to sort of shake his defender, and Lamar is looking for him and finding him.
Yeah, completely agree, first of all. And I think you've hit on some of the really important points. The first is he worked together in the offseason. And the time he spent with Beckham and Zay has been invaluable in that regard, that he's been with the two. I don't know that he spent a lot of time with Andrews, but they've been together for years, so it's probably not as necessary. I felt like if there was a chance Isaiah Likely could raise his hands to be involved in those during the offseason, that'd be terrific. It might be just a ticket to get him back more involved in the offense. But then I thought about it a little bit, and I'm like, how many balls is Lamar Jackson going to want to throw in a 1 or 1.5 hour throwing session? And I don't know that you can have 7 receivers there and have it really make sense. So I know he's, there were some good things, not from this last season, but from the previous offseason where I think it was Bateman getting together, or maybe even Prochet, and wearing a helmet while he was getting throws from. So he's getting a little bit better ball tracking skills with that. So I think the offseason work, tremendous value, certainly. In terms of the play on the field this year, and returning specifically to Flowers, he has a lot of schemed targets. So he's a jet pitch to him is not a trust play, and a wide receiver screen is not really a trust play. Sure. He's getting that ball because that's the scheme. So I think you come down to the extended plays, and you mentioned that earlier as well. I think Flowers has done a really good job, especially recently, on extended plays. And the 46-yarder was 3.5 seconds or even more than that before Lamar released the ball this last week. And Flowers had time to basically whip route his guy at the end of his route and lose him back to the inside in a way we've seen in camp a lot. That is just a wonderful trust addition for Lamar to see that wide open that late in a play. I think that's where a lot of the trust bank account, as I kind of think of it, is built. And the other way you build trust is by not having your receiver let you down and give up some interceptions that occur either because you dropped the ball or you didn't really make a good defensive play or you tipped the ball high and that allowed somebody to make a play on the football, et cetera. But I think right now Flowers is sky high, obviously, in terms of his trust with Lamar.
Yeah, and one of the most important things is to be that guy on money downs, and so far, you can't be upset at all with how Zay has answered the call.
All right, I'll pick another one here, and since we've gone Zay, let's go to Bateman, because I don't know that he's gone the complete opposite end, because I think this last week was really important for him. I think he made a couple plays, he was in space. He's gotten pretty good separation this year, so an interesting separation graph that his separation was good, but his catch point and yak results were not good, and that's, as I understand what the guy is trying to graph with that, the drops would fit into a vertical axis, whereas horizontal axis was showing separation. So the separation has been good, and Bateman has been able to be open, but that doesn't mean that he's earned the highest level of Lamar trust. And I think we've seen a few things. Last year there were some drops. This year there have been some drops, particularly in the Pittsburgh game comes to mind as a place where he had some drops. So did Flowers, by the way, in that game. But this last week, two really nice first down throws, wide open, that were I don't know how much they were really trust throws, but one of them I believe was extended. And it's nice to see him, come up with money down catches, as you mentioned. I thought he might have lost a little. Undone a little of his two catches with some not great tracking on the third ball where he was targeted by the left sideline deep, and he kind of tapped his own chest after the play. It's good, by the way. Take responsibility for that right away on the field. You don't want to cast aspersions on the throw or not be able to get to it or whatever. And obviously the big loss was last week when he failed to. He was a little flat-footed when the ball came, and it might have been off target, but he didn't make a really good attempt to deflect that ball. Probably wasn't going to catch it, but he could have kept it from being intercepted.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bateman's headed in the right direction. I think it has been up and down a little bit, but he has been consistently getting separation. We've seen really good chemistry between Bateman and Lamar before. Last season, those first two games, I mean, Lamar was statistically among the top quarterbacks, and he was going for Bateman and having great success with him. And again, I think it is crucial that those catches were on those money downs. I think the catch though, or the drop pass where he was going towards the left sideline, was that Snoop passing to him at that point, or am I thinking the wrong thing?
Well, let me think. That might have been Snoop, because was it the last play of the game was for Bateman? I'm looking now. You're right. That was 3:26 left of the game, and Snoop was in. So you're absolutely right.
I mean, it's still on-field production, right? Yeah. So no question about that. It's just maybe not quite as visceral.
To Lamar,
yeah.
Yes, I could see that.
So I think Bateman just needs to keep doing what he's doing, and I think that I think both Lamar and Monken have shown kind of like that they understand that Bateman really is going to need to be a key piece of this offense. They've schemed stuff to him to get him involved, and Lamar, if Lamar's looking for you on third down and you're rewarding that decision, I think that's going to lead to good things. So I think they know that he needs to be more involved, and I think good things will happen.
Yeah. And it is kind of easy to scheme him as the first read. It's been my thought that actually he's gotten a little bit less play because the Ravens haven't trusted their offensive tackles this season, and honestly, with some good reason. And this game hopefully changes that in terms of some additional time. But it wasn't a great ample time and space game. Ample time and space will feed Rashad Bateman because he needs to go to the top of the route, wiggle to get that great separation that he gets. And then Lamar has to read it from there. He has to read the loss of leverage by that defensive back or the win that Bateman has had at the top of the route and then throw to it. And it takes a little more time. If he were, a slant guy, very regularly, and it was just a matter of trusting that he was going to get off the line correctly against some other player, much easier to read that more quickly. And so Bateman, it takes a little more time for things to develop.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that point is well taken, and looking to the next several weeks on the schedule, I think those opportunities will be there. And so then moving on to the next player on our list, I will go with Nelson Agholor. Agholor, we've said a number of times throughout the season so far, has been one of the most pleasant surprises on the team. Certainly, probably the one playing most above expectation.
Yep.
Out of any of the receivers. I mean, Zay, you kind of feel it more because you invested a first-round pick in it, so it's like that much more gratifying. But Agholor has performed very admirably. He's been a reliable target in the red zone. He actually his catch in the end zone this game, it was after 9+ seconds of Lamar moving around in the pocket. At that point, every receiver is sort of trying to do what they can to stay open. All of the routes have been concluded, so it's really on the receiver to continue to try to get open. And that's exactly what Agholor did. He made himself available as a target. And credit to the O-line, credit to Lamar for hanging in there, and Agholor rewarded that trust. I think his account is as high as anybody else's.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think I can sum it up most easily with this. Agholor has caught 81% of the balls thrown to him this year, 17 of 21. Career, he's a 60.1%. Actually, let's go before Baltimore. I don't have before Baltimore, but this year, that 80% has moved his career rating over 60%, I believe, for the first time. So he's not only doing that, but he's also got 10.6 yards per target, which that kind of snuck up on me in terms of that's a fantastic year.
Yeah.
If he were to maintain that, that would be the second highest figure in Ravens history, exceeded only by the 11.04 by Andrews in his rookie season in 2018. So Aguilar's having a fantastic year, and I think you mentioned the touchdown pass. That's a great place where he needs to find somebody, and Agholor knew how to make space both vertically and horizontally on that play. And I think a lot of players wouldn't realize that in that case, maybe the vertical spacing is more important to get to the back of the end zone where it's a my guy or no guy situation, as opposed to getting left, which actually brings more interception risk into the play where Lamar has to throw longer across the field. The old Dan Deerdorf thing you mentioned on here, but any quarterback will tell you this, thou shalt not throw back across the field as a rookie quarterback. But it doesn't apply to Lamar anymore, but it still is a place for high interception risk.
Yeah, no, Agholor just represents a real tremendous return on investment. He's just really been a key part of this offense and continues to reward Lamar for his trust.
He would, I think what you said though, I think he would absolutely get my most above expectations Raven right now. I was pissed off at the price tag, in particular with the draft capital involved, because they gave up a 6th round pick to do it. And I think the Ravens need every pick, but I think the return has justified that at this point.
Definitely.
All right, my turn, right?
Yes.
Let's go. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's go to the opposite end of the spectrum. I'm going to talk about Isaiah Likely, who has not had a target now in 4 games. And, it's interesting because he's only dropped 1 ball the entire season. And it somehow seems like more than that because he's not getting opportunities. But he dropped the ball against Indianapolis. It was a very key throw. Might have been the last throw he got because he had a 20-yard play earlier in that game, if I recall correctly. I've got the receiving stuff here, so let me just take a quick look. So he had 2 balls and a 20-yard throw, I believe, was earlier in the game, and then he had a late fourth quarter drop, which stalled a drive because it was on 3rd down, and it was very costly. And he has not gotten the ball again since. 0 against Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Tennessee, Detroit. His snaps have been cut down. There is a Monken trust factor here and a Lamar trust factor, so a trust within the scheme factor. And I wonder, and I guess I'll pitch it to you on this. Do you think Monken has lost some trust, and that's why he may not be getting schemed up as the first read on some plays where he might be getting some opportunities, and also seeing the playing field less?
I think Monken maybe, particularly this early on in the season, really has put pressure on himself to really get this offense rolling. And like a lot of people say, and I think there's truth to it, success breeds success, right? So after a performance like this week, you want to build on it, continue to do well. And I think at that point, Monken would be really well served. And I would hope to see him layering in some of these forgotten guys a little bit. I agree with you. I mean, I think you can kind of, because there has been so little of either of these 2 players, both Likely and Kolar, I think the opportunities will continue to be there. Kolar's drop was a big one, and it was just it went right through his hands. But again, Bateman has had drops. They've continued to go back to him. I just think that right now Monken's we need to get this receiving game going. We need to be more explosive, and we're going to come back to these guys.
Well, 61 snaps for Likely the last 4 weeks combined, which is still a lot more than Kolar, who's been inactive once and has only 19 snaps total in the last 4 games. That's actually 19 snaps since week 1, for that matter. And week 1, he had his only. Did he have 1 target that week? I think that was correct. And he had 1 target and he dropped it. So that's no way to go through life, son. Unfortunately, is the way you have to look at that.
Yeah, I mean, Kolar is pretty clearly the number 3 tight end on the depth chart, and Likely has, Likely did some positive things this week in the blocking game. I mean, he had a big block on was it Dan Campbell for the it wasn't Lamar's touchdown, it was Gus's. Is that?
Yeah, he was notched inside on the right side on the RR2 touchdown by Edwards, which happened. I think it was their last touchdown. It was in the second half, right?
Yeah, it was pretty late in the game. That's also the one where Stanley was lined up in the slot. But it was very key. Edwards ran between Stanley and Likely, and Likely was on the outside. And I mean, Dan Campbell's no pushover. So he has made a case to continue to be on the field, even if what he's doing is blocking. But with that will come some catching opportunities, I think.
Okay. I agree that the blocking has been a thing, and that's been kind of a letdown with Kolar. Kolar really tried to get bigger over the offseason. He made that point at the podium and is a guy who I think they really wanted some blocking out of. And now, I see him as a guy who probably fights Vokalek for a roster spot next year. I don't think his draft status at this point is going to carry him any further in terms of what's happened. And that may be the case with Likely as well in terms of what's going on. It'd be a shame because both of those guys I would have put in a young possibility to grow into young producers category. When you analyze the roster, they're guys you hope to get really value over their contract with during this first contract. And now I'm just unsure about both of them at this point. Andrews will be around. It doesn't appear like these guys are getting too much of an opportunity. And Monken's desire to play 12 has largely recently been focused around Ricard and not, these two guys.
Yeah, for sure. Is my turn?
Yeah.
Let's go with OBJ. OBJ, I think, just like Flowers, spent some time in the offseason working with Lamar. Positive thing. They seem to be on the same page a good bit. Has had some pretty sure hands. Really, the biggest problem with OBJ has been his.
With the busy fall season already in swing, you might be looking for wholesome, convenient meals for jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you fuel up for breakfast, lunch, and dinner with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. Guys, I've shared moving. I was using this for all my meals. Now I'm working from home. Guess what? Microwaves in the other room. I'm using this for all my meals. Factor is how I get through my lunch day every day. But they've got breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I haven't tried the breakfast ones yet, but why not? I think I might add that to my next order. But I love them for lunch. Plus, they've got new autumn fall flavors out right now for limited time, featuring seasonal veggies like cranberry, pecan chicken, and apple Dijon pork chops. And again, just like everything else, they're ready in just 2 minutes. They'll satisfy your fall cravings during this busy season without the hassle. So go ahead and level up with Gourmet Plus options as well. Prepared to perfection by chefs and ready to eat in record time. Treat yourself to upscale meals with premium ingredients like broccoli, leeks, truffle butter, and asparagus. Head to factormeals.com/Ravens50 and use the code Ravens50 to get 50% off. That's code Ravens50 at factormeals.com/Ravens50 to get 50% off your Factor meal today.
Health and general availability, which is something that, anybody could have told you that was the big risk. But, anybody who's expecting OBJ to be, OBJ of old, hasn't been really paying attention to his production over the past few years. I think, I think you've said a few times that, like, if he was giving them anything near to what he was giving the Rams during their playoff run, then that would be really excellent. I think he's probably performed below that, but
yes.
not significantly below that when he's on the field. I think just his availability.
Let me stop you for 1 second. During that playoff run, he had over 10 yards per target, and it was not an insignificant number of targets. So the real question was, what do you look at, in terms of his recent production? Because his production during the regular season has been an absolute ski slope since his rookie year when he had 10 yards per target. And it had dropped to a low of 6.4 with the Rams during the regular season in 2021. But then he put together this 10 yards per target short burst of, I think it was about 22, 26 snaps. So it's not that few in terms of total number of snaps. And that's where, the widely divergent views, let's just say, of what Beckham might produce this year arise from. And also, I think, to your point, you're right on the money when you say you have to just factor how many games he's going to play. And there were a lot of people saying, I'm turning my back on that. If he's healthy, I'll do that. And that's not what you're doing when you're signing somebody that age. You can't have a guarantee on any component of their production, and health being the big one.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And I guess, we can put it this way. It's very clear that both Zay Flowers and Nelson Aguilar have outperformed OBJ. Mm-hmm. But OBJ has done some good things with when the ball's gotten in his hands. He's been pretty physical, I think, after the catch. I think he's in there. He's producing at a level that you might, I think I would be fine with my number 3 receiver producing at, particularly given that Andrews is one of the top receiving options as well. So he fits in that way. That, like, ROI obviously is, I just don't think that you can measure OBJ's impact in terms of just, the on-field play. I think number one, he was brought in to help seal the Lamar deal. So no matter what, if he really was a part of that, I think that you've got your money's worth. And number two, I think that he brings some of that veteran savvy that the Ravens really buy into, right? Like it's the reason that Justin Houston and some of these other veterans are brought on, is to show the younger guys how to do it at the higher levels. And I think he has something to offer in that respect.
I can manufacture value for Beckham that might even go beyond that. If you're talking about his heady on-field play in terms of drawing penalties, I think that could be undervalued. He's had, I think, 3 penalties this year that have just been unbelievable veteran anti-hero kind of plays. The pull down play in the end zone where he drew a pass interference that he actually interfered on, that was enormous. The stepping on Jeffrey Simmons' hands and getting Simmons to retaliate by pushing him down for a 15-yard unnecessary roughness or whatever they call it. I think it was UR. And the initial cutoff play he orchestrated for the back judge or side judge, I forget which, in the opening game, where he drew a pass interference that certainly he was nowhere near the football and not going to get anywhere near the football, I thought was terrific too. Then you come back in the other way and you look at the interception that he really should have made a better play on that football. No, I mean that was definitely a low point in the season. Did you notice that DeAndre Hopkins was like really remarkably good at that as well when we played against him in the Titans game? I mean, he's a defender. Yeah,
he was flopping all over the field. I mean, just like, and they were giving him every call.
Oh, I missed what you said. I missed your understanding because I thought we were talking about the interception, but he's always been pretty good at that too. But you're right. I mean, he's a veteran who begs for flags, and he is the Tom Brady of receivers in terms of crying to the officials immediately after the play's over. Yeah. All right. Is it my turn here? That was a good one. Well, I guess let's talk about Devin Duvernay, since we've got a couple good ones to do still at the end here. Devin Duvernay, obviously very disappointing season, and a big reversal from last season, particularly in catches made on the balls thrown his way. And he had last year, I want to make sure I have this up in front of me so I'm quoting it correctly here, but last year he caught, where's his targets? Okay, he had 49 targets and caught 37 balls for a 75.5% catch rate. This year, he's caught 2 of 7 balls for a 28.6% catch rate. That's obviously not acceptable. He's only got 8 yards on the season, and his playing time has shrunk like crazy. One of the things that was improving his catch rate last season, and it's not the only one at all, by the way, not the only one at all, is that Duvernay was involved in a lot of gadget plays, and he got a lot of the targets that Zay did that are kind of like automatic catches. Basically, any wide receiver screen is almost 100% chance to be completed. And all jet pitches are effectively completed unless something goes horribly wrong. Ones that are just these little flips forward. And Duvernay has not had nearly as many of those opportunities because the gadget plays are going to Flowers this year. Something I've been very critical of is that you have a bunch of speed guys. Flowers has a bunch of separation ability downfield, can certifiably draw a safety away, draw a safety's attention. Whereas Duvernay, I don't think we've really seen that in his career as often. It just seems to be like Mitchell, Hill, and Duvernay give you all you need in terms of gadget guys if you allow them to do it. And Flowers can create a lot more spacing for you if you run him on a different, deeper route tree.
Yeah, I mean, Duvernay has largely been phased out of the offense. I kind of feel the same way that I feel about Likely, just in terms of philosophically. I think you don't want to wait until you need those guys to rely on those guys, right? Like, you need to get them involved. Even if Duvernay's getting, 3 targets a game or something like that, on some easy stuff, it's important. It's a long season. You've already had several games where receivers have been injured.
Yep.
Andrews, I don't even remember whether he missed time, but he definitely had a quad injury that was hampering
Game
him.
1. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Game 1. So these things happen. You're going to need to rely on your depth at one point. And so, get them involved. Particularly Duvernay has a skill set. We know he has great hands. He has great speed. His route running is limited, but those are things that you can put to good use, and will allow you to use some of your other weapons in perhaps more productive ways, like Zay Flowers. So I think the bank is kind of low, but I don't necessarily put that all on Lamar. I put a lot of that on Monken.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's one of the only things about Monken's scheme that I'm really highly critical of is the use of those speed guys. And it's great to see Keaton Mitchell get a jet pitch out of Pony. So I believe it was the first use of Pony for the season, because I've been really watching for it, but I might have missed one. They did line up Duvernay in the backfield on a play, which is not what I would maybe classify as Pony. I'm really talking about having two tailbacks in there, one split and one in the backfield, or both in the backfield, either one. But this was a case of Mitchell coming across the formation in jet motion and taking a pitch, and that was a thing of beauty. That was just a thing of beauty to see. And he still had Flowers on the field on that play, I believe. Your other point, I think, is a really good one, is you don't want to wait until you absolutely need to have these guys to rely on them at all. If Duvernay has to come in, bankrupt of confidence, both in himself and from Lamar at midseason, because Flowers gets hurt and has to play 4 games at the Z, at that point, you don't want to have a rusty Duvernay there as your big weapon. I mean, I'm sure he wouldn't be targeted all that much in those situations, but he's got to come back and do all the gadgetry he's got to do, and you got to do something to try and get him down the field and make best use of his speed. So I think he's got to be in there. One thing that was kind of good this last week is they really split the wide receiver snaps in total a lot more. Nobody had more than 44 out of 60. So it was nice to see that divided a little more in terms of playing time.
I do think it was a missed opportunity in the, maybe, let's say you start to feel very confident about the outcome at like second half of the third quarter, confident to the extent that you're really not worried about, them mounting a comeback. I think at that point, start rotating some of your guys in, right? Like, maybe Andrews doesn't need to be in on every play. Like maybe start, putting in Justice Hill. Not Justice Hill, Isaiah Likely. Maybe start putting in, Duvernay instead of Aguilar or something like that. Like start getting those guys in when you have the luxury of being up by so much. Your defense is playing such dominant, so it's not every week you're going to have like such an incredible blowout. So I think that was a little bit of a missed opportunity, and that's the one thing I would sort of be critical of this last game.
Yeah. And not that there were a whole lot of targets handed out, because when they cleared the bench, they only had 3 plays with Snoop, and as we talked about it, Bateman got the 1 target in those 3. So
yeah. So I think it's me. I will go with the running backs and Ricard. Edwards, Justice Hill, and I can't say Ricard's been more involved in the passing game than he was last year, but sort of the concept of how the running backs are being used has evolved in this offense as opposed to Roman's. We're seeing more screens or some of these outlet throws, one of which resulted in the longest passing play of the season for the Ravens, which was Gus Edwards rumbling down for 80. And incidentally, I don't know whether you covered this or not. That was really encouraging. Gus looked really good running down the sideline. He just looked, aside from the fantastic result, right? His gait was very smooth. I rewatched that play a number of times, and he just he looked healthy, right? Like, I think there have been times in this season where he sort of maybe just didn't look quite right. He looked really good in that moment. So yeah, I think they're using them more often, and I think it's just more things that defenses have to defend, and I think Lamar's executed pretty well, and so have the running backs.
I've appreciated obviously what's happening with the running backs, and Edwards' 80-yard play is fantastic. Ricard's big play, fantastic. But I just want to break down a few things that are really statistical anomalies here. First of all, the running backs have caught all but 1 ball that's been thrown to them this year. Okay, and that's not all the trust component, but it's a nice thing to have. Hill has caught 11 out of 11 balls. Edwards 4 out of 5. 4 out of 4 for Ricard, and 1 out of 1 for Mitchell. It was just this jet toss this last week that obviously he's going to complete basically 100% of the time. But that's still incredible. And as incredible as the 10.6 yards per target from Aguilar has been, this is where it really gets weird. The Ravens' two leaders in this category, if you put a minimum at 4 receptions, Patrick Ricard has 12.0 yards per target this year, 4 plays for 48 now. And he's a guy who had a very low yards per target in the past, but this year has gotten an opportunity to kind of run in space a little bit more, and frankly, run a little more diverse route tree, which I've been very pleasantly surprised by. In terms of how he's been able to find space and be out in the clear for Lamar to find him. And the other guy's Edwards, who now has 5 targets and 18.6 yards per target this year. That's obviously all driven by the 80-yard play, but huge trust play for Edwards. Not as much for the run after the catch, although I'm sure Lamar's having as much fun as we are watching that, outrun those two guys down the sideline. But because he found that space deep there, and Lamar called it scheme. I think there was some scheme in terms of Lamar rolled out of the pocket. He didn't want to take credit for creating the play himself, but I think the Edwards finding space was an ad lib component of that play. So they had a designed move of the pocket to the right, or at least a design option to move the pocket to the right. Then Edwards is out there, but it's Edwards who made that play by getting behind defenders who were a lot slower than him and catching the ball cleanly. Lamar put it right on the money, and and Edwards caught the ball, was ready to run. But just having those the two defensive linemen chasing him down the field was about as fun as it ever gets watching football. And then the guy sitting next to me actually made the point is, I think he should have just ran right over that safety, but it looked like he actually juked the safety very effectively at the end to me, and probably got an additional 10 yards of getting dragged down on that play by him out of it.
Yeah, for sure. I know. I agree with your read on that. And honestly, like, even if you go back to like some of the passes to Melvin Gordon, like that slant that Gordon almost got into the end zone on that one, and went for a good amount, like the timing component has been really good. So, the backs have all rewarded Lamar's trust in them with this like very high catch rate, but also the scheme, has been just that. Like, anytime we tried, screens, these little screens or pitches to the backs in recent years, the timing was just terrible.
Yeah. I left Gordon out of this because he's not really a part, I don't think, of the Ravens' plans, but you never know. He's sitting on the practice squad, no elevations left. If someone were to get hurt, and this might be the case with Mitchell, maybe he gets elevated for something, but the Ravens actually are in a tighter bind in terms of roster spots now that they've gotten a little healthier to really make that happen. But he's sitting there at 15.3 yards per target. He's caught all 3 balls thrown to him. That wheel route early in the year is big. But the point you made is great, is that I think Monken is doing a better job of finding ways to utilize those backs in space. Let's do that. And also take Flowers out of this gadgetry equation, since, look, these guys are all doing it well. I want to go back to Hill for 1 second. Hill's been the one kind of disappointment. He's got the highest workload with 11 targets, but he's only gotten 27 yards on the season, so 2.5 yards per throw. There have been issues there with them trying to do a lot of swing routes to Hill that I think have been largely ineffective. And I still think they need to be looking through their catalog of plays here and deciding, which do we need to eliminate, not just which ones are really working and do we want to stick with. But there's some of those plays I really have not liked. And unfortunately, Hill has never really been a high yards per target guy. And I don't really have a good reason for that. He's somebody I was really hoping would improve with Monken's scheme.
Yeah, I think that if I were trying to incorporate Hill into the passing game, I think it would be more on like sort of these like, he chips the defender, which he's been really good at this season. He's had some brutal, blocks on some defenders, and then leaking out as a sort of a just a last sort of read to salvage the play sort of thing, but not so much this like behind the line of scrimmage business.
Yeah. Okay. There's only one name I think I haven't heard so far, and that's Mark Andrews. Let's talk about him a little bit. Trust never been an issue between him and Lamar. They came into the league together. From their very first plays, he was a backup tight end, or maybe not quite a backup in his first camp, but they've always kind of taken their reps together. And I've always felt like the offense has been for a lot of Lamar's time here is read one, Andrews, and then create or run. But he's obviously been right at the top of the target list a lot. And his obviously career targets show that. And Lamar has put the ball in significant risk throwing the ball to Andrews over the years, such that a lot of his interceptions have actually come there, but he still trusts Andrews not to create additional interceptions for him by tipping the ball sometimes, or by dropping the ball right into the defender's hands, as we've seen from players like Bateman occasionally in the past. Trust has never been a factor between those two.
Yeah, definitely not. They have a mind meld thing going on, just like Flacco and Pitta was a really good one. They're on the same page, and kind of like you always hear when the Chiefs are playing that Kelsey sort of makes up his own routes, and Mahomes has an idea of where he's going to be. I mean, there's definitely something akin to that going on with Andrews and Lamar. And Andrews has really just been spectacular in the end zone this season, like really, bodying up defenders. I think he has been the beneficiary of this improved receiving core big time. The slow start to the season, I think a little bit because of injuries, but you're really starting to see that now. I still think that, the Ravens can implement Zay in a way that will benefit Andrews more with some of those deep routes, clear things up in the middle. But it seems like every week, the productivity for Andrews is increasing.
Yeah. All right. Outstanding topic, by the way. A lot of fun always to do these with you, Slava, and really always appreciate your contributions to the makeup of the show, not just the discussion with you, which is also fantastic, but this is a lot of fun. Tell folks where they can talk football with you online.
I'm on Twitter at Slava Cooperstein. That's SLAVAKUPERSTEIN.
All right. Outstanding. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a film study short, hit me up on Twitter. Always interested in your topics. DMs are always open. I promise I'll get back to you very quickly about your show idea. This is Ken McCusick, and also for Slava Cooperstein, saying goodbye, and we'll talk to you next week on One Last Thing.